I have a condition. It's a minor genetic anomaly, really. My mother had it, and her mother before her. A funny little quirk of the O0 women. We don't blink much. I can hold a stare for a solid 40 seconds, a skill that has won me an impressive number of bar bets across 3 continents and precisely 0 arguments with my husband. This was never a problem until I married Callum Blackwood, the alpha king of the Northern Ridge territories. His wolf, and by that I mean the deep animal layer of his mind, the part that catalogues threats and calculates sightlines while the rest of him is trying to have a normal conversation, interprets sustained, unblinking eye contact as a direct dominance challenge. He's named it Balthazar, which I think tells you everything you need to know about my husband's relationship with his own instincts. You don't name something Balthazar unless you've accepted it has a personality you cannot control. Every single time I look at him for too long, which, given my condition, is every time I look at him, Balthazar initiates a full-scale internal panic that invariably ends in some form of physical prostration. The first time it happened was a week after our bonding ceremony. He'd come home from a grueling 12-hour session with the Pack Council, shed his clothes, and shifted, the way he always does after a long day trapped in human form. A full, shuddering transformation into a massive gray wolf that padded 3 circles on our bedroom rug, collapsed, and refused to move for 20 minutes. It's his version of taking off a tight pair of shoes. When he finally shifted back, still slightly wild-eyed from the transition and very much naked, I was standing across the room thinking about whether we had enough time for the roast chicken I was planning. I suppose my gaze lingered. One moment he was the formidable alpha king reaching for a shirt. The next, he was on the floor, not collapsed, not fallen. He dropped to the rug, baring his throat, his entire body rigid with the effort of not rolling onto his back. A low, involuntary whine was coming from somewhere in his chest, the kind of sound that bypasses human dignity entirely and comes straight from the animal. I stared, this time in genuine shock, which probably didn't help. "I didn't all right?" I asked, my voice unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. He groaned, pressing his face into the priceless Lioshan silk. His voice was muffled. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" "Like what?" I asked, taking a hesitant step forward. "Like you're about to disembowel me and assume control of the territories." "I was thinking about chicken," I said honestly, and I forgot to blink. He lifted his head, his handsome face a mask of pure disbelief. "Forgot to—" He didn't finish. The wolf part of his brain, having processed my continued unblinking stare, apparently decided the throat-bearing approach was insufficient. He scrambled backward and wedged himself into the corner behind a large armchair, making himself as small as a 6'3" alpha king can make himself, which is not very small at all. This has become our normal. It happens without fail at least once a week. My own wolf, the part of me that clocks every exit before I sit down, that catalogues the scent of a room before I finished walking into it, that has opinions about my posture, my diet, and every man I've ever spoken to, finds the entire affair beneath us. "Oh, baby, he's on the floor again," she sighs. I've come to think of her voice as Sasha, though unlike Callum, I didn't choose the name. She just showed up one day, fully formed, sounding like a woman who has raised 6 children, buried 2 husbands, and has 0 patience left for nonsense. "Look at him down there, the alpha king, showing his belly because you were thinking about chicken." She pauses. "I'm not mad, sweetheart. I'm just disappointed." "No, actually I am mad. Get up, you beautiful idiot." She's not talking to me. Sasha believes she could run this pack better than anyone currently in charge, and she is not quiet about it. I've tried to fix this. I really have. I've set blinking reminders on my phone. I've practiced in the mirror, forcing my eyelids down in a spastic, unnatural rhythm that just makes me look like I'm having a seizure. But my face betrays me. The moment I get lost in thought, the blinking stops and the Alpha King starts whimpering. The wolf part of Callum has now developed a preemptive flinch. The moment I enter a room, his shoulders round, his chin tucks, a nearly imperceptible shift toward the nearest exit. The pack has noticed. His beta, a long-suffering man named Marcus Vance, just looks tired. He's seen Callum do many strange things over the years, but apparently spontaneous submission to a woman thinking about poultry was a new one. Tonight, we host a reception for Alpha Alistair of the Silver Creek Pack and 2 other delegations. Trade negotiations. Very important. Very formal. Very much requiring the Alpha King to remain upright for the duration of the evening. We are, in a word, doomed. Callum stood before the full-length mirror, adjusting the collar of his formal tunic, black wool embroidered with the silver Blackwood wolf sigil. It was supposed to make him look powerful, in command, the undisputed Alpha King of a territory spanning 500 miles. At the moment, he felt like a man about to walk into a den of hungry lions, armed with a wet noodle. And the noodle was his own wolf. "Mate is coming," Balthazar announced. Not as a separate voice exactly, but as the deep, instinct-level layer of his mind that had never learned volume control. It operated exclusively in what Callum had come to think of as emotional capitals. "She smells like books and the wind just before it rains. My favorite smell." "Easy," Callum muttered, straightening his cuffs. "It's just a party. We just need to get through it." "Party? With Mate? Will she look at us?" "I hope she looks at us." A beat. "Wait. Oh, Moon. What if she looks at us?" The wolf layer of his mind went from triumphant joy to high-pitched terror in less than a second. This was his life now, a constant oscillating current between adoration and mortal fear. He adored his wife. His deepest instincts were convinced she was going to kill him. "She will look at us," Callum said to his reflection. "She is our mate. She is allowed to look at us. It does not mean she is going to rip out our throat." But the eyes, the unblinking void. "The old laws are clear. She has a genetic condition, you fluff-brained menace. We've been over this." The void does not care about genetics. The door to their chambers opened and Lissa walked in. She was wearing a simple, elegant dark blue dress that matched her eyes. She gave him a small, nervous smile. "Ready to go face the wolves?" she asked. Callum's breath caught. She was beautiful. Utterly, devastatingly beautiful. And she was looking right at him, her eyes wide, a little anxious, and completely, totally, unblinkingly still. "She sees us." Balthazar's instinct-level shriek hit him like a wall of ice water. "She is assessing our weaknesses." The neck. She is aiming for the neck. Callum's knees buckled. He caught himself on the mahogany dresser, knuckles white. The urge to drop, to show his throat, to do anything that would appease the terrifyingly beautiful woman currently smiling at him was almost overwhelming. Not because something was controlling him, but because every animal instinct he possessed had independently arrived at the same conclusion. Yield. "Callum?" Her smile faltered. She took a step closer, brow furrowed. "Are you okay? You look pale." The concern only made the stare more focused. A beam of well-intentioned impending doom. "She is worried. Our weakness disgusts her. She will find a stronger mate. One who blinks." "I'm fine," he gritted out, forcing himself upright. He turned away, pretending to adjust a cufflink that was already perfect. Just thinking about the seating chart. It was the lamest excuse he'd ever used. And he'd once told his father a bear had stolen his homework. Marcus Vance chose that exact moment to appear in the doorway. He took in the scene. Callum rigid and facing the wall, Lissa confused and worried, and his shoulders slumped with a weariness that went bone deep. 5 minutes until you're due in the Great Hall, Alpha, he said, his tone flat. He cleared his throat. Alpha Alistair's delegation arrived an hour ago. Alpha Tegan from the coast is already in the Great Hall. Everyone's on edge. "Why are they on edge?" Lissa asked. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "Rumors about the Alpha King's new mate. Apparently there's a theory that you possess unprecedented dominance, based on the fact that you once looked at a visiting packmaster for 11 seconds and he couldn't finish his soup." "I was trying to remember his name," Lissa said weakly. A distinction that was lost on him. Marcus looked at Callum. "Shall we?" Callum took a deep breath and turned to face his mate. He looked, very deliberately, at her chin. It was a lovely chin, elegant, determined, also a safe chin. "New plan. Tonight, you only look at people's chins." Lissa blinked. Once, twice, a miracle. Their chins? And foreheads and ears. Just avoid direct, sustained eye contact. "For the love of the moon, Lissa, treat everyone's eyes like they're the sun." She nodded, expression serious. "Eyes are the sun. Got it." He offered her his arm. Her hand was cool and steady against his sleeve. For a moment, it was just them, his mate, his partner, the woman he loved more than his next breath. Then she glanced up at him, her gaze accidentally meeting his for a fraction of a second, and the wolf layer of his mind let out a pathetic internal whimper. It was going to be a long night. The great hall was warm with firelight and buzzing with the careful, overly polite conversation of wolves who weren't sure they trusted each other. Servants moved between the guests, carrying trays of wine and small plates of food. It was, by all appearances, a perfectly civilized gathering. Lissa was destroying it from the inside. She had implemented a system Sasha had bullied her into practicing that afternoon, the blink and pivot. She would make eye contact for precisely 3 seconds, blink deliberately, then pivot her head to look at a nearby object, a tapestry, a candelabra, a particularly interesting flagstone. It was exhausting. It made her look like she was watching a spectral tennis match no one else could see. "Luna Blackwood," Alpha Tegan said, extending a hand. She was a sharp-faced woman from the coastal pack, her handshake firm and appraising. "I've heard a great deal about you." 3 seconds. Blink, pivot to the fireplace. "All good things, I hope," Lissa said to the mantelpiece. Tegan's eyebrows rose. She glanced at Callum, who was standing close enough to intervene if necessary, his expression carefully neutral. "Your Luna seems distracted, Alpha Blackwood." "She has a keen interest in architecture," Callum said smoothly. "This hall was built in 1743. She's admiring the stonework." Lissa pivoted back. 3 seconds on Tegan's left ear. Blink, pivot to a wall sconce. A young wolf from the Silver Creek delegation, barely 20, with the nervous energy of someone attending his first formal event, approached to introduce himself. "Luna Blackwood, it's an honor to—" Lissa turned to him mid-pivot. Her gaze swept past his face on its way to a tapestry depicting the Battle of Grey Hollow, and for approximately 1.3 seconds, her eyes crossed his. The young wolf made a sound like a deflating accordion and took 3 rapid steps backward, bumping into a servant carrying a tray of wine glasses. The tray wobbled. The servant, who had been trained for this, or at least trained for some version of this, executed a remarkable one-handed save. Only 1 glass fell, and it landed on the young wolf's shoes. "I am so sorry," Lissa said, pivoting to his left shoulder. "Are you all right?" "Fine," he squeaked, wine pooling around his feet. "Absolutely fine. I just remembered I need to be over there." He gestured vaguely at the opposite end of the hall and retreated at speed. Callum appeared at her elbow. "What happened?" "I pivoted too slowly. I caught him in the crossfire." "The crossfire," Callum repeated flatly. "You make your own eyes sound like a weapon." "Callum, a 20-year-old wolf just spilled wine on himself and fled because I looked in his general direction for 1 second. They are a weapon. I just don't have a safety catch." Across the room, Marcus was watching this exchange while simultaneously preventing Alpha Tegan from cornering a terrified member of the Silver Creek delegation. He caught Callum's eye and raised his coffee mug, in a gesture that somehow communicated, "I am not being paid enough for this," and also, "I told you so," simultaneously. The evening ground on. Lissa perfected a technique of speaking to people while appearing to admire the ceiling beams with scholarly fascination. Callum trailed her like a bodyguard, ready to provide architectural explanations at a moment's notice. Between them, they had now attributed her behavior to an interest in stonework, ceiling joinery, silverware design, and, in one desperate moment, the fascinating grain pattern of a breadbasket. Marcus later told them that the breadbasket comment had been overheard, and a rumor was circulating that the Luna could read the future in woven objects. It went on like this for an hour, an excruciating, socially acrobatic hour during which Lissa managed to have 6 complete conversations without looking anyone in the eye for more than 3 seconds. She was sweating through her dress, her neck ached from the constant pivoting, but she was doing it. No wolves had fully submitted. No diplomatic incidents had occurred. The bar was underground, and she was barely clearing it. Then dinner happened. They were seated at a long, formal table, Callum at the head, Lissa at his right. Alpha Alistair of the Silver Creek pack was directly across from her, a grizzled, barrel-chested man in his 50s who looked like he could wrestle a bear and had probably tried. He'd been watching her all evening with the wary fascination of a man who'd heard a lot of strange stories and was trying to decide which ones were true. The soup course arrived. Lissa focused on it with an intensity that suggested she was attempting to discern the life story of every lentil in the bowl. She was so focused on not looking up that she almost missed Alistair's question entirely. "Tell me, Luna Blackwood, is it true your family is from the Eastern Ozero line?" Lissa looked up. She meant to do the blink and pivot, she really did, but his question had knocked her off rhythm, and she was trying to remember. Was the Ozero line connected to the Eastern Territories? Her mother had mentioned something once, years ago, about a great-aunt who had lived near the border. She was thinking, and her face, as it always did when she was thinking, forgot to blink. She stared directly at Alpha Alistair for 10 seconds. 20. Alistair froze mid-chew. His spoon hovered. His eyes widened. He wasn't seeing a woman lost in genealogical thought. He was seeing an unblinking, unreadable, unnervingly still pair of eyes fixed on him with what appeared to be the full weight of a predator's assessment. 25 seconds. 30. Alistair set his spoon down very carefully. He dabbed his mouth with a napkin. He glanced at Callum, who had noticed what was happening and was staring fixedly at his own wine glass with the desperation of a man trying to will himself invisible. Alistair looked back at Lissa. She was still staring. She was now trying to remember if it was her great-aunt or her grandmother's cousin who had lived near the eastern border, and whether that was before or after the territory realignment of 1987. Alistair set his napkin on the table with the careful precision of a man disarming a bomb. Beside him, his beta, a compact woman named Yara, who Lissa would later learn had been recording the entire dinner in a small leather notebook, stopped writing and looked up. Her pen hovered. Across the table, Alpha Tegan was watching with the sharp, assessing expression of someone filing information for future use. The young wolf from earlier, who had been relocated to the far end of the table after the wine glass incident, was gripping his goblet with both hands and staring at his plate as though his life depended on not looking up. The only sound was the faint crackle of the fire, and somewhere in the kitchen, a pot lid clattering. Alistair cleared his throat. "I see," he said, though she hadn't said anything. He pushed his chair back from the table. "If you'll excuse me, I've just remembered an urgent border matter." He was gone within 20 minutes. Not fleeing, exactly, but definitely leaving the castle with more urgency than a border matter that had just materialized would normally require. He made it as far as the village inn, before apparently deciding that a 4-hour drive in the dark was less dignified than simply waiting until morning. Yara followed, her notebook clutched to her chest, already mentally drafting what would become the infamous 14-page tactical assessment. Tegan stayed. She stayed through dessert, watching Lissa with an expression that was less fear and more professional curiosity, like a general observing an unexpected variable on a battlefield. When she finally left, she shook Lissa's hand, briefly but firmly, and said, "I look forward to our next meeting, Luna Blackwood." She did not specify whether this was a compliment or a warning. Lissa blinked, looked around the now half-empty table, and found the remaining guests staring at her. "I was trying to remember which side of my family is from the east," she said to no one in particular. "I think it's my grandmother's cousin." Silence. "Well," Sasha said, with the exhausted pride of a mother watching her child set fire to something expensive, "that's one alpha down. You didn't even have to open your mouth. That's my girl." She paused. "Don't do it again." "He thinks you're a hidden alpha," Marcus said. He was leaning against the doorframe of their chambers an hour later. His voice had the flat, resigned quality of a man delivering a weather report about a hurricane he could see from his porch. "His beta pulled me aside. Apparently, Alistair has concluded that you possess some form of silent dominance that can be projected through sustained eye contact. He's already sent word back to Silver Creek." "I was thinking about my grandmother's cousin," Lissa said, sitting on the edge of the bed, her shoes kicked off. "Be that as it may," Marcus continued, "the Silver Creek delegation is now telling the other packs that the Alpha King's new mate once stared down their alpha at a dinner table, and he couldn't finish his soup." "He was eating lentils," Lissa said weakly. "The distinction is not going to make it into the retelling." He straightened up. "Tomorrow's trade talks are going to be interesting. I'll adjust the seating chart." He paused. "Maybe put you at the far end, with a large floral centerpiece between you and the Silver Creek delegation." He left. The door clicked shut. Silence settled over the room. Callum was standing by the window, looking out at the dark forest. His jaw was tight. He hadn't said anything since they'd left the dinner table. "Callum," Lissa said quietly. He turned. He looked tired, the deep, bone-level tired that came from holding himself together in public while his deepest instincts were screaming at him. "Maybe I shouldn't come to the trade talks tomorrow," she said. It cost her something to say it. "It would be simpler. I could stay here, work in the library. You could handle Alistair without the complication of my—" "Yeah," he said, too quickly, too gently. Maybe not this time." He didn't mean it to hurt. She could see that. He was exhausted and grasping for any solution that would make tomorrow's impossible situation slightly less impossible. But the words landed in the exact place they always landed, in the soft, unprotected spot she'd been carrying her whole life. The place that whispered, "You're the problem. You're the weird one. You're the thing that needs to be managed." Maybe not this time, which meant it would be easier without you. Lissa nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice perfectly even. "That makes sense." She lay down on her side of the bed, facing the wall. She didn't say goodnight. Callum stood by the window, the echo of what he'd just said catching up to him in the quiet. He replayed it. Maybe not this time. He heard it the way she'd heard it, and felt something cold settle in his stomach. He opened his mouth to, what? Take it back? Explain that he didn't mean she was the problem, just that the situation was the problem? Except the situation was her face, which was her, so... She was very still. The stillness was a wall. He didn't know how to climb it. "We hurt her," Balthazar said. Not panicked, not dramatic. Just the quiet, miserable recognition of a wolf who had stepped on something and heard it break. Callum sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, listening to the too even rhythm of his wife's breathing and knowing she was awake. Then he got up, went downstairs, stripped his clothes in the mudroom, and shifted. The transformation was a relief. The dissolution of human complexity into something simpler and more honest. He was a wolf. He was upset. He ran. He ran the perimeter of the territory, hard and fast, through the dark forest. his paws pounding the frozen earth, his breath steaming in the cold air. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs ached, and the human thoughts began to lose their sharp edges. But the cold thing in his stomach didn't go away. It stayed, lodged there, shaped exactly like the silence his wife had put between them like a closed door. When he finally circled back to the castle, the moon was high and the windows were dark. He shifted back in the mudroom, shivering, pulled on the spare clothes they kept there. His body felt wrung out. His mind was quiet. Balthazar was quiet. He went looking for Lissa. She wasn't in bed. She was in the library. Of course she was. Lissa had waited until she heard the back door close and the distant muffled sound of the shift, a sound you could feel more than hear, a kind of atmospheric pressure drop. Then she'd risen, pulled on a robe, and gone down the back stairs. But she hadn't gone to the library first. She'd gone out the kitchen door, into the walled garden behind the castle, and shifted. It had been weeks since her last shift, too long. She'd been so consumed with the social performance of being Luna, the blinking schedules, the pivoting, that she'd neglected the most basic thing her body needed. The shift hurt more than usual, her joints protesting the long gap. But then she was through it, and standing on 4 legs in the cold garden, and everything was simpler. She ran the grounds alone, not the wild, punishing sprint Callum was doing somewhere out in the forest, a loping, meditative circuit through the orchard and along the frozen stream. The world in wolf form was all scent and sound, the sharp mineral smell of frost, the distant rustle of a vole under dead leaves, the fading trace of Callum's path still hanging in the air. She followed his scent trail for a while, not because she was looking for him, but because the wolf part of her found it comforting even when the human part was hurt. When she shifted back, trembling and bare in the cold garden, she felt better. Not fixed, but clearer. The kind of clear you can only get when you've spent 20 minutes being an animal who doesn't have to worry about what her face is doing. She dressed, went to the library, and opened the book she'd been reading, Anatomical Aberrations and Genetic Quirks of the Northern Lineages. She'd found it in the restricted section days ago. It listed families with hereditary webbed toes, a bloodline that sneezed violently whenever they were near birch trees, and, on page 287, a brief entry that made her heart stop. The O0 anomaly. A benign condition primarily affecting females of the O0 line, characterized by a significantly reduced blink rate. Subjects can maintain eye contact for extended periods without discomfort. Historically, this trait was viewed with suspicion in unshifted communities, but within the packs, it is considered little more than a curiosity. No known associated pathologies. A curiosity, Lissa whispered to the empty room. She traced the words with her finger, her whole life, reduced to a footnote. A curiosity with no known associated pathologies. Except, apparently, the pathological submission of alpha kings and the systematic destruction of interpack trade negotiations. Someone should update the entry. A curiosity, Sasha repeated, her voice low and fierce. Listen to me. Your grandmother stared down a drunk human twice her size in a bar in Novosibirsk, and he bought her a drink. Your mother did it in 3 countries. And you just made an alpha king choke on his lentils without saying a word. That is not a curiosity, baby. That is a bloodline. She softened, just slightly. Now stop crying in libraries. It's beneath you. We have work to do. Lissa almost smiled. The library doors opened. A familiar scent reached her. Pine and winter air and the cold forest and regret smell that was uniquely Callum after a hard run. His hair was damp from the shift. His eyes were red-rimmed. She didn't look up. He stood in the doorway for a long time. Then he walked over and sat, not in the chair beside her, but on the floor a few feet away, leaning his back against a bookshelf. I realize, he said, his voice rough, that I am sitting on the floor of my own library, which is exactly where your face puts me on a regular basis, so the symbolism is not lost on me. She didn't respond, but something in her chest loosened just a little. He was quiet for a moment, staring at the rug. "My father," he began. "The old Alpha King. He was a lot. He once held off a rogue pack of 10, single-handedly, for 2 days. The stories they tell about him are all true. When he died, his last words to me were, 'Be strong for them, son.' Not be happy, not be wise, just be strong." He pulled at a loose thread on the rug. "I've spent every day since then terrified that I'm not. That one day they'll all look at me and see I'm just a man in a title that's 2 sizes too big. And tonight, when Alistair left and Marcus gave me that look, the one he gives me when things are going sideways and he's too polite to say so, all I could think was, they can see it. They can all see it." He paused. The grand clock ticked in its corner. "And when you said maybe you shouldn't come tomorrow, I should have said, 'Don't be ridiculous. You're my Luna and you belong at that table.' That's what my father would have said. But I was scared and tired, and I took the easy answer instead of the right one. I let you think you were the problem." He looked up at her. "You're not the problem, Lissa. You were never the problem." The library smelled of old paper and beeswax, and the cold night air they'd both carried in from their separate runs. "My mother used to win free drinks with it," Lissa said, her voice quiet. "The staring. In bars, back in the human town where she grew up. Men would bet her they could outstare her. They always lost." She turned the book toward him, open to page 287. She called it her superpower. I just called it embarrassing. He looked at the page. The O0 anomaly. A curiosity. No known associated pathologies. "They left out the part about toppling alpha kings," he said. She almost laughed. It came out as more of a breath, but it was there. "Callum." "Yeah?" "Come sit up here. You look ridiculous on the floor." He got up and sat in the chair beside her, and for a moment they just existed in the same quiet space. 2 people who loved each other and were both, in their own particular ways, terrified of being too much and not enough at the same time. "What if we just told them?" Lissa said. He looked at her. "Told them what?" "The truth. That I have a genetic condition that makes me blink less than normal. That it's not a dominance challenge. It's not a supernatural weapon. It's just my face." She tacked the book. "It's documented. Page 287. I have a footnote and everything." Callum stared at her. "You want me to tell the Alpha of Silver Creek that the reason he couldn't finish his lentils is because my wife has a genetic footnote? Would you rather he keeps telling people I can psychically dominate wolves with eye contact?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "No." "Then we tell the truth. We bring the book. We let them laugh. And then we do the trade deal like normal people." He considered this. Every instinct he had, the ones that had spent a lifetime learning to project strength, to never show the seam where the armor met the skin, rebelled at the idea. Admitting that his mate's stare was an accident, not a weapon, felt like handing his reputation to someone holding a match. But Balthazar, surprisingly, was calm. "Mate is smart," the wolf part of his mind offered. "Mate has a book. Books are powerful. I like this plan." "When did you become the strategist?" Callum muttered internally. "Since Mate stopped looking at us and I could think again." "Okay," Callum said to Lissa, "we'll try it your way." He reached over and took her hand. "And you're coming to the trade talks." "Obviously," she said. "Someone has to explain the footnote." They came downstairs together the next morning, which Marcus noticed immediately and chose not to comment on. The kitchen was warm and noisy. 3 pack members arguing about eggs, a teenager doing homework at the counter, someone's toddler methodically disassembling a muffin on the floor. This was what a pack house sounded like before the formal masks went on. Lissa loved it. She loved the chaos of it, the way the room smelled like coffee and butter and too many wolves in one space. She sat at the long kitchen table and reached for the coffee pot. Callum sat beside her, close enough that their elbows touched. It was a small thing. It was everything. "So," Marcus said, sliding into the chair across from them. He had dark circles under his eyes and the expression of a man who'd been up since dawn, managing a diplomatic crisis caused by lentils. "Alistair hasn't left yet. He's staying at the inn in the village. His beta says he's reassessing the situation, which I think means he's embarrassed but doesn't have an exit strategy." "Good," Lissa said. "That means we can still talk to him." Marcus looked at her, then at the book tucked under her arm, the Anatomical Aberrations volume, bristling with paper markers. "You're bringing the book." "I'm bringing the book. To a diplomatic meeting with the Alpha of Silver Creek. To a diplomatic meeting with the Alpha of Silver Creek." Marcus turned to Callum. "Your wife is going to show a visiting Alpha a medical textbook about her own genetic anomaly and hope he finds it funny rather than insulting." Callum took a long sip of coffee. "That is the plan, yes." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he reached across the table and took the book from Lissa. He flipped to page 287, read the entry, and closed it. "I'll set up the sunroom, neutral ground, good light." He stood. "And for the record, this is either the bravest or the stupidest thing you've ever done, and I've known you both long enough that the line between those two is essentially invisible." He left. The teenager at the counter, who had stopped pretending to do homework about 3 sentences in, looked at Lissa with wide, fascinated eyes. "Is it true you can stare for 40 seconds without blinking?" 43, Lissa said. "It's my personal best." "That's so cool," the teenager breathed. It was, Lissa reflected as she finished her coffee, possibly the first time anyone had called it that. They sat in the sunroom with Alistair, his beta, and Marcus. The room was bright and airy, large windows overlooking the eastern forest. Sunlight fell across the polished table in warm slats. It was supposed to feel inviting. Alistair sat on the far side, looking like a man who'd been summoned to his own execution and was trying to be dignified about it. Lissa set the book on the table and opened it to page 287. "Alpha Alistair," she said, looking at his chin. "I owe you an explanation, and possibly an apology for the lentils." Alistair's brow furrowed. "The lentils?" "Last night, when I appeared to be staring at you with what I understand has been described as silent dominance, I was actually trying to remember which side of my family is from the Eastern Territories. My grandmother's cousin, as it turns out." She slid the book across the table. "I have a condition. It's called the O0 anomaly. It's genetic. I blink significantly less than a normal person. It's been documented since the 1800s. It's considered, and I'm quoting directly here, a curiosity with no known associated pathologies." Alistair looked at the book. He looked at Lissa. He looked at Callum, who was sitting beside his mate with the expression of a man who had accepted his fate and found it mildly hilarious. "You're telling me," Alistair said slowly, "that I left a perfectly good dinner and spent the night at a village inn with a mattress like a bag of rocks because of a blink rate?" "Yes," Lissa said. "I'm very sorry about the lentils." "They were good lentils," Alistair said, his voice faintly wounded. "They looked excellent," Lissa agreed. "I was also trying to remember if your pack is the one with the traditional fermented berry ceremony. Are you?" "We are," Alistair said, momentarily derailed. "It's a spring equinox tradition. Quite sacred, actually." "It sounds lovely." She could feel the stare building, her eyes drying, the familiar urge to just hold. She turned to Marcus instead. "Marcus, could you demonstrate?" Marcus, who had been briefed, sighed the sigh of a man who has seen many strange things and knows there are more to come. "Go ahead." Lissa looked at him, full eye contact, no blinking. Marcus sat there, completely unaffected, his expression one of profound professional weariness. 5 seconds. 10. 15. He picked up his coffee and took a sip. "She does this," he said to Alistair, still being stared at. "Multiple times a day. You get used to it. It is, I will note, significantly less disruptive than the alternative, which is the Alpha King ending up on the floor." "That happened once," Callum said. "It happened on Tuesday," Marcus said. "It was a controlled descent." "You were behind an armchair." Alistair's beta, a compact woman named Yara, who had been sitting rigidly silent this entire time, leaned forward. "With respect, Luna Blackwood, how do we know this isn't just a cover story? I drafted a 14-page tactical assessment based on what my alpha reported. 14 pages. I sourced historical precedents." "I'm very sorry about your 14 pages, Lissa said, with genuine sympathy. "There were diagrams," Yara said tightly. "She made diagrams," Alistair confirmed, rubbing his face. "I made diagrams," Yara repeated, staring at the book on the table as if it had personally offended her. "Cross-referenced with the Ashworth Dominance Index. I color-coded the threat levels." Marcus, still being stared at by Lissa and still completely unbothered, raised his coffee in Yara's direction. "I feel your pain. I once wrote a 6-page incident report about a Tuesday morning submission event that turned out to be caused by my alpha's wife thinking about whether she'd left the oven on." "Had you left the oven on?" Alistair asked Lissa. "I had, actually," Lissa said. "The roast was fine, though." Alistair looked between them all, Marcus placidly sipping coffee under the full force of Lissa's stare, Callum sitting beside his mate with the slightly dazed contentment of a man who had recently survived a marital crisis and was feeling lucky about it, Yara clutching her pride like a wounded animal, and Lissa herself blinking at last and looking entirely, disarmingly, ordinary. His mouth twitched. The twitch became a tremor. The tremor became an actual, genuine laugh, a deep, barrel-chested roar that shook the water glasses. "A blink rate," he wheezed. "I've been telling my pack council we were dealing with a supernatural threat of the highest order, and it's a blink rate." He wiped his eyes. "Oh, Yara is going to kill me." "I'm sitting right here," Yara said, "and yes, I am." "She made diagrams," Alistair said to Callum, still wheezing. "My beta just drinks more coffee," Callum said. And Alistair laughed again, harder this time, the kind of laugh that strips away pretense and leaves two men who are both slightly ridiculous and know it. Yara stared at her 14 pages of tactical assessment, now rendered entirely useless by a genetic footnote, and appeared to be going through the 5 stages of grief in rapid succession. The trade deal was signed within the hour. Alistair, it turned out, was much more agreeable when he wasn't convinced the woman across the table could psychically dismember him. He even mentioned as they shook hands that his own family had a genetic quirk. His grandmother sneezed violently whenever she was within 50 feet of a birch tree. "Made forest territory negotiations very difficult," he said, wiping his eyes. "We lost 2 lumber contracts because of it." "At least yours is seasonal," Lissa said. "Mine is year-round." That evening, by mutual unspoken agreement, the 4 of them, Callum, Lissa, Marcus, and Alistair, shifted and ran. It was Alistair who suggested it, a peace offering in the oldest language wolves knew. They shed their human complications in the mudroom and let the change take them. Callum went first, a massive gray wolf with a silver-threaded ruff. Then Lissa, smaller, darker, quicker, a wolf who ran like she was cataloging every scent and filing it for later. Marcus, lean and brown, running with the efficient, unhurried stride of someone who'd been cleaning up other people's messes his entire life. And Alistair, a grizzled, heavy-shouldered beast who ran like a man who'd remembered he was also an animal and was delighted about it. They ran the eastern ridge under a cold, clear sky. No politics, no staring, no footnotes. Just 4 wolves moving through the dark forest, their breath steaming, their paws barely touching the frozen ground. "There you go," Sasha murmured, running alongside her, stride easy and unhurried, radiating the bone-deep satisfaction of a wolf who had known this would work out because she always knew. Look at you, running with the pack, like you belong here. She nipped at Lissa's ear, affectionate and sharp. Because you do, idiot. The birch tree man isn't bad either. Good lungs. Tell him to keep up. The shift happened. The real one, the internal one. 3 weeks later, on an unremarkable Tuesday evening. Callum was reading on the sofa, something about water rights in the Southern Territories, dry as dust but necessary. Lissa was curled in the armchair across from him, marking up a manuscript with a red pen. She looked up at him, not for any particular reason, just because he was there, and she liked looking at him. And her face had never gotten the memo about looking away. She stared. 5 seconds. 10. 20. Callum felt the familiar stirring, the wolf layer of his mind registering the sustained eye contact, reaching for the old panic response. But it was like reaching for a door that had been moved. The panic wasn't there. In its place was something else, something warm and steady that had been quietly building for weeks, through the library and the laughter with Alistair and the pack run under the cold stars. She was looking at him the way she always looked at him, steady, unblinking, completely and entirely present. And for the first time, the deepest part of him understood what it was actually seeing. Not a challenge, not a threat, not the unblinking void, just Lissa, looking at the person she loved, thinking about nothing in particular. Maybe dinner, maybe water rights, maybe just him. Oh, Balthazar said, very quietly. Not a shriek, not an emotional capitals declaration, just a small, startled recognition, like a wolf who had been flinching from a sound his whole life, and had finally heard it clearly enough to realize it was music. Oh, that's what that is. Callum met her gaze. He held it. 10 seconds. 20. 30. His knees didn't buckle. His throat didn't tighten. The instinct to submit was gone, replaced by something warmer and steadier and infinitely less dramatic. Just the simple animal knowledge that this was his mate, and she was looking at him, and that was good. You're not blinking, he said. I never blink, she said. Balthazar's not panicking. She lowered her red pen. What's he doing? Callum paused, listening to the quiet hum of his own mind. The wolf layer was still, not dormant, never dormant, just content. A wolf lying in a warm patch of sunlight, watching his mate with something too quiet to call joy. It was closer to gratitude. He says, Callum said slowly, this is nice. Lissa's eyes shone. She still didn't blink. Tell him I agree. They sat like that for a long time, looking at each other across the warm room. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, and the fire shifted in the grate, and the world went on being complicated and full of wolves who misunderstood things, and betas who drafted tactical assessments, and genetic anomalies that refused to be cured. But in this room, on this unremarkable Tuesday, looking was not a problem to be solved, or a weapon to be feared, or a curiosity to be footnoted. It was just two people seeing each other clearly, and being glad. You know, Callum said after a while, Alistair sent a letter last week. He wants to bring his grandmother to the next summit, the birch tree one. He thinks you two would get along. An alliance of genetic anomalies, Lissa said. He's calling it a quirk coalition. His words, not mine. That is the worst name I've ever heard. I told him that. He's already had stationery made. Their son was born the following autumn, a boy with Callum's jaw and Lissa's devastating, unblinking stare. They named him Finn, after Callum's grandfather, and they knew they were in trouble approximately 4 minutes after birth, when the midwife handed him to Callum, and the baby locked eyes with his father, with a focus that should not have been anatomically possible in a newborn. The small one, Balthazar observed, with the reverent awe of a wolf encountering a creature even more powerful than his mate. The small one has the eyes. He has the eyes, Callum confirmed to Lissa, who was exhausted and laughing. It's genetic, she said. I tried to warn you. The O0 anomaly, it seemed, bred true. By 6 months, Finn could outstare every member of the pack. By 1 year, he had reduced 3 betas and a visiting healer to nervous wrecks, simply by watching them with calm, unblinking curiosity from his high chair. The pack healer, a stoic woman named Bryn, who had once set a broken femur without flinching, had come for Finn's routine checkup, taken one look at the baby's steady, unblinking gaze, and sat down very slowly. He's been looking at me for 2 minutes, she said. He likes you, Lissa offered. He's looking at me like he knows things. He's 7 months old. What could he possibly know? He knows you have a biscuit in your pocket, Callum said, who could smell it from across the room. Bryn looked down. She did, in fact, have a biscuit in her pocket. She handed it over. Finn accepted it with the serene gravity of a tiny monarch accepting tribute, and continued to stare. I'll send my notes by post, Bryn said, standing up. He's perfectly healthy. I'm leaving now. Marcus, who had been appointed honorary uncle by virtue of being the only wolf in the territory fully immune to the stare, was the only one who could babysit without developing a stress twitch. This was because Marcus had spent 3 years building up a tolerance, the way some people build up a tolerance to spicy food, through repeated, painful exposure, and a refusal to quit. He's judging my sandwich, Marcus reported one afternoon, holding Finn on his hip. The baby was staring at the sandwich with the intensity of a health inspector who had seen things. He's probably just hungry, Lissa said. He's been staring at it for 45 seconds. I feel genuinely evaluated. He paused. Also, he stared at the mailman this morning, and the mailman dropped the post and left. We may need a new mailman. Was the mailman a wolf? Callum asked. Human. It doesn't work on humans, Lissa said. I've never had a human react to it. It doesn't work on human adults, Marcus corrected. A baby staring at you without blinking for a full minute is unsettling, regardless of species. He looked like he was being studied by something that had recently arrived on this planet and was deciding whether to keep us. That's just what babies look like, Lissa said. Not all babies, Marcus said. Just yours. At the annual gathering of alphas that winter, Callum and Lissa sat at the head table with Finn on Lissa's lap. The baby surveyed the room with his enormous, unblinking O0 eyes. 3 alphas adjusted their collars. One excused herself to get more water and didn't come back for 20 minutes. Alistair, the only alpha who'd been briefed, leaned over and whispered to the nervous alpha beside him. It's genetic, completely harmless. Don't make eye contact if it bothers you. Just look at his chin. He's a baby, the alpha hissed. He's an O0, Alistair corrected, with the weary authority of a man who had survived his own encounter and come out the other side with a trade deal and a good story. Just look at the chin. Finn chose this moment to turn his enormous, unblinking gaze directly onto the nervous alpha. He stared. He did not blink. He was, as far as anyone could tell, thinking about absolutely nothing. He was 5 months old. He did not have complex thoughts yet. He was merely existing, with maximum eye contact, in a room full of apex predators. The nervous alpha excused himself. Lissa, watching this, caught Callum's eye. He was grinning, the wide, helpless grin of a man who had fully accepted the cosmic joke of his life. She grinned back, and neither of them blinked, and Balthazar didn't flinch, and it was, quietly, the happiest moment of her life. We're doomed, Callum said. We were always doomed, she said. Oh, Sasha breathed, and for the first time in Lissa's life, her wolf sounded stunned. Oh, look at him. He's got it. He's got the eyes." She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with something fierce and tender and absolutely terrifying. "That's my grandbaby. Nobody is ever going to make him feel like that's something to fix. You hear me? Nobody." She paused. "Now teach him to aim it." Lissa smiled and did not blink.